Ex-cult members of Reddit, how were you introduced to the cult and how did you manage to escape? I grew up in the family radio cult. What they are mostly remembered for is their 2011 prediction of the end of the world and rapture. Spoiler, the world didn't end. I was a young adult and able to leave in the chaotic aftermath without too much of a fight from my parents. I'm doing okay. Many people are not. Some are still making more predictions. I do want to take a second and say that 90% of the people in the group were kind people who really didn't want the world to end, but were just so brainwashed that they really believed it. Some of the nicest, most giving people just got sucked in, chewed up, and swallowed in the abysses that was. From birth, literally walked away without a penny at 21. When you leave a cult you not only lose your home, family, financial stability, but you lose your lifelong identity, your only known community, and you lose the ability to be sure of anything anymore. What cult? Please expand. Sounds interesting. Advanced Training Institute ATI. The leader Bill Goddard has in recent years fallen into disgrace after the bulk of us raised in the cult became adults and opened up about the horrible things they taught us and experienced. Goddard, as it turns out, wasn't just a narcissist who created an entire religion with himself at the head, but now many allegations of him molesting young girls have come out as well. No surprise to anyone who grew up in it, but he was very well respected in the Christian religious right world. How are you doing now? Have you adjusted to normal society? Much happier and healthier. Very self-aware and able to analyze normally vs how the cult taught us to train our thinking to be devoid of individuality. Some cultural things are still hard to grasp or pick up on. I also don't approach a situation or concept from the same way many others would, which can lead to confusion. Financially not so amazing, but I've turned out a lot better than many others who left. I've got a career, normal friends, and a healthy mind, so I'll take it. I ran away from home at 16 and joined this weird spiritualistic cult. They didn't have any gods, but they believed a lot in spirits and ancestors and stuff. We all lived in this big house owned by the leader guy whose name was Jonathan. Jonathan had a special kind of connection to the spirit world or whatever. They were all super good people. They took me in, gave me food and clothes and stuff. One of the guys gave me a job in his company. They had a lot of rituals and stuff we all did, with a huge emphasis on community and common good and honoring the dead. It wasn't a bad thing, so does that make it not a cult? I don't know, they did require a lot of dedication to the group and stuff. I believe 5% of income had to go to the cult, to help Jonathan with rent and so they could all buy food and I lived with them for a few years. They got me through high school and without them I never would have gone to college, which is the reason I left and where I am not. Sounds like you found a fairly benevolent hippie commune. Well, I was born into a family that were Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, whether they are a cult or not is debatable, but I for one do believe that it is one. The moment where I realized that I had to leave was when I brought my friend over one day. My mom scolded me for bringing them over and told me that everyone was out to ruin my life if they weren't in the same religion as us. They would talk about how they are horrible and corrupt people, that we needed to cleanse them. I took a look at my friend and I couldn't see that. All I saw was love and kindness. I knew that these views were corrupt themselves. And then I started to talk to my brother who also shared the same thoughts. We both brought it up with our parents and the elders of our church, and none of them could give us any answers about anything. This is when we both decided that we cannot follow the lead of people that cannot explain what they are leading us into. In the end, we just didn't really believe in the religion itself. Not my story, but my parents' story is pretty decent. I've posted this somewhere else before too. My parents grew up in a religious cult and as teenagers, they fell in love, but when they asked permission from the church elders to court each other and get married, they were denied. My mum was excommunicated suddenly in her early 20s. She didn't know why until finding out by chance a long time later. So they didn't see each other again for 20 years while one remained on the inside and the other in the real world. Mum tried writing to him a couple times, but dad was brainwashed and told her that she was evil and should repent for her sins. Things that he had been told about her by the cult, etc. Both remained unmarried. When dad was excommunicated himself 20 years later, my mum heard about it through his brother who had left some years earlier. It took them another year to get in contact. They were in different continents, didn't know where each other were, and dad was trying desperately to get used to life in the outside world. having never lived in normal society before and now in his mid-40s. Dad told us later that he wanted to find mum, but was afraid because he believed she was going to hell. Edit. Clarified this with dad this morning. Apparently he didn't believe this when he left actually, but he spent at least a year wondering if he should ask to go back because he believed that his soul was damned by leaving. One day he finally had a letter from mum. He wrote back immediately and basically assumed that they were getting married, packed his bags and moved across the world to find her. Mum answered the door to dad in the early 80s, having not seen him in 20 years. They were engaged that night and married within 6 weeks. They are still happily together. According to my dad, who joined a cult when he was 17 in Cali and left about a year later. He joined because free dogs and free place to live. He left because the cult started to tell people not to contact their families and only the high level members got dogs anymore. He says after he left, the main leader went to jail for crimes of some sort and the whole cult folded. My dad used to be one of those cult guys you'd find in airports with the shaved heads and robes. He said he joined because the cultists were all like friends to each other and he was disillusioned with the world in the aftermath of the Vietnam War. One day he was offered a fair day's pay for a fair day's work on a construction site, and after a few weeks of that he just broke off contact with the church, grew his hair out with a beard, and they never found him. Found them online when I was only 14. Wasn't introduced to it. I stumbled on it. They seemed normal at first, but then things started getting weird. If you didn't agree with everything they said, you were shunned as an outcast, which I found strange considering so many of them had joined as outcast members of society. I wanted to leave. They said you could anytime, but it was an addiction, and they knew you weren't going to leave. Finally I just gave in, and I've been on Reddit ever since. My mother is a follower of Supreme Master Ching Hai since 2004. Google her. Really weird when it first started. Tried to force my dad and the whole family to eat vegan and wasted tons of money on useless merchandise, like an $800 portrait of the master. Aside from that and the condescension toward us non-believers, no real culty threats like you typically hear. I realized my family was in a cult when I was 10 and we had a burn party for the television. As it exploded, people chanted, "Die, Satan, die." Sounds like my childhood. More burnt toys and movies and books than I can count. On mobile, so I'm sure I'm way late to the game, but here's my story. I literally walked into the Church of Scientology. I moved to Clearwater as a minor, made some friends and walked into, without anyone present with me, into what I thought was a museum. Being brought up without any religion, although both my parents were raised conservative Muslims, I grabbed onto the ideology of you are what you make of yourself. Long story short, 5 years later, while working for a Scientology-owned company while still exploring whether I wanted to join or not, I got held hostage literally for 3 hours because I wouldn't accept their philosophy on a small incident and left the workforce only to have a beer bottle broken over my head by my LT, a lifelong Scientologist boyfriend, and have the cops who were Scientologists arrive at the house to determine there was nothing to escalate to a domestic violence report, and then later on 2 days later flee the house with my dogs and I what little I could with the time I had for my own safety. So yeah, that's my life in the cult. Some people are cool. Most people are brainwashed. TL. DRF Scientology. The idea of calling the police, only to have the police be part of the cult, is just terrifying. I haven't yet, but I will as soon as I am 18. I am a Moonie. The Unification Church was a church founded by Reverend Sun Myung Moon in the 50s or 60s. I can't remember exactly when. The church's members are often referred to as Moonies. A name members are divided on. Some like it, some equate it to a pseudo curse word. The Unification Church and its teachings center around the founder, Sun Myung Moon. We were taught that Moon, when he was a young boy in North Korea, then Korea, was accosted by Jesus himself, who descended from the sky to inform the young Reverend Moon that it was his destiny to bring the people of Earth back to God. In order to achieve this end, Moon collected his thoughts into a book called The Divine Principle, used as a supplementary text by members. In order to accelerate the growth of the church, he arranged marriages. My parents were matched by picture. Moon literally picked up a picture of my mom and of my dad and matched them like that. In order to marry all the couples he matched, the church arranged mass wedding ceremonies. I am a second generation member, though I know some third generation members. I intend to leave the church officially when I am 18. If I were to choose to stay, my parents would seek a girl in the church for me to marry and, with the consent of the girl's parents, I would be married off to that girl in a mass ceremony, along with 4,000 other couples. My parents do not know that I am leaving the church and I don't know how they will react when they find out, to be honest. Though, I'm more worried about how they'll react to the fact that I have had a secret girlfriend for the past 3 years. I've been dreading the moment when they inevitably find out. Just to give you some hope, I grew up in the Unification Church as well. My parents and siblings are still very involved in the church. I stopped believing in it when I was around 18 years old, 26 now, and consider myself an agnostic, and am now married to a non-unificationist. I told my parents I was dating someone after about 4 months into our relationship because I knew it was going to marry this guy. My mom was upset, but eventually got over it after meeting him. My dad was surprisingly understanding. Now they both adore him. The day before our wedding, we let my parents hold a blessing ceremony so we can be married in the eyes of the church, just to make them happy. It doesn't have to be one extreme or the other. I hope it goes well for you. I've covered this when I first got on Reddit, but my parents joined a cult in West Texas when I was about 8-9 after searching for the truth their whole adult lives. Long story short, it wasn't that crazy at first. I like to use the frog in boiling water analogy. If it was that batch insane when they first started going, they wouldn't have stayed. It became a doomsday cult. Multiple marriage. All the girls were married up by old elders, leaving nothing for us young dudes, so naturally, we rebelled. My escape wasn't as harrowing as some others, but my leaving did set up me saving my 15-year-old sister, under cover of darkness, abducting her from my dad's house and transporting her to my mom in LA, from marrying an elder who already had 4 wives and about 10 kids, who was later arrested for molesting his stepdaughter. It's been a wild ride, guys. This is my friend's story. He joined because he was homeless and they promised to get him clean and sober. He left because he got clean and sober. He took what he needed and faked the rest. There were others there out of desperation. He connected with a few of them. Their philosophy was eat the meat and spit out the bones. I'm still clean and sober. I had 3 years in January. Whenever I wonder to myself, how the hell do people fall for cults? I remember that they take advantage of people at their most broken, vulnerable. You rarely see the rich, famous and successful joining them, aside from maybe Scientology, since they don't really need the help. My sister was involved with a cult for a little while. She never joined. She was too smart for that, but she was friends with a few of them. But of course, that's how they get you. Eventually, like a year or so after she started hanging out with them, they basically forced her to make a choice: join the church or get lost. They worded it differently, of course, about how they just wanted her to be saved and all that nonsense. Obviously they're just trying to prey on people with few friends and low self-esteem, making them scared to lose the only friends they have and tricking them into joining. My sister got the F out of there and never contacted those people again. Smart gal. My birth mother is Ashay Nadine, who is a cult leader in her own right. She has so many people brainwashed into believing she's some sort of prodigy that communicates with aliens and whatnot. She basically disowned me because I refused to hop into the crazy with her. She forbade my siblings from having any contact with me too, lest they also be disowned and lose out on all her money that she's snatched from these gullible followers of hers. Ashay Nadine. Google her. She's nuts. My mom was in this cultish organization in her 20s, not really sure why she joined, and used to talk a lot about her glory days. When my siblings and I were old enough to participate, naturally, we joined. They require you to pay to be there and participate in the mission trips teaching, which are basically required to maintain membership, and then require total submission from women to men in the group leadership and complete submission from the guys to the group leadership. Lots of hierarchy, and if you don't hear the voice of God, you're effed. As a woman, if I disagreed with anything my superiors said, they would ostracize me and do pretty much everything in their power, which was a lot, to make my life hell. They preyed on people who have low self-esteem and few friends. Then they teach you that you only matter if you hear and obey God, and then effectively make it so only friends you have are members. Even though I had friends and good enough self-esteem when I joined, I started feeling pretty shy about myself and lost almost all of my friends. Outside because obviously and inside because I asked questions. The most cultish part of my experience was that despite all of this, they still enticed me to come back a few times and rejoin activities, committing to greater and greater responsibility each time, which meant worse treatment each time because, for me, having greater responsibility meant asking questions sometimes, even logistical clarification questions, i.e., when are we supposed to be at X event? What's the address of Y location? Infuriated my leader. When I tried to talk to his leaders about this, they tried to gaslight me then ostracize me. On third time back, I promised myself I would never return. My brother is still involved and it makes family gatherings extra tough. My sister would be involved if her husband's job would allow him to relocate. I went back one time to see my brother get married to another member. I ran into my old crew and leader who discouraged me from starting medical school, noting that it would delay my marriage and childbearing and that the workforce isn't the woman's place. It's a message I've been hearing from my mom for years and continue to hear every time we talk. It's very hard continuing to be a part of a family that's so deep in this ideology. TLDR cultish group. Tried to leave 3 times. Out now. Family is still in it. I was raised a Jehovah Witness, so I was brainwashed from infancy that this was the true religion. If you want an idea of what the cult was like, think of 1984. No, seriously, that's not an exaggeration. The cult had no crimes, doublespeak, and a worshipful attitude of the governing body, head honchos of the cult, and anything they said was automatically right unless it was though to be wrong later on by the same governing body. Any disagreement meant re-education in the ministry of love, or shunning, which meant complete avoidance by everyone still in the cult from you, including family members who were still in. I got out when I said enough is enough. I still haven't talked to my mother in 10 years.